Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for the second day of EASA's annual safety conference in virtual form. I'm greeting you from Cologne, where it's rather foggy this morning. I'm the head of communications for EASA here in Cologne. I hope, at least in your dreams, some of you went maybe last night to the beautiful city of Friedrichshafen, where we originally planned to have this conference. Maybe you took a stroll on Lake Constance. Maybe you went to a little bar somewhere and had a chat with old friends or new acquaintances, discussed the first day of the conference, discussed the general situation. Many of these things that we miss in this crisis. What we're going to do for our opening this morning is to look a little bit at the impact of the crisis on our general well-being. And for that, I'd like to welcome John Franklin, our Head of Safety Promotion, who will give us a live talk on the subject of well-being in COVID. Thank you, John.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for returning, and hopefully we've got something quite interesting to start today's conference off. So the theme of this conference has been the route to recovery. We had panel sessions yesterday on the health safety protocol and how we can welcome our passengers and regain their trust and confidence. We talked about operating safely and effectively despite the challenges we face. And shortly, we'll have a session on enhancing our environmental sustainability. But one really important area that we're also keen to include, and is such a major part of our recovery, is how we care for our people, all of the different jobs and functions and roles that people do across the aviation community. There are so many challenging things happening at the moment, and so many people going through so many difficult things. When the crisis first started, we hoped for a quick recovery. We started off making a sprint, and what has slightly turned into more like a marathon. So one of the first things we start to realize is that burnout potentially for some people, potentially a lot of people, becomes quite the challenge. So when it comes to well-being, the first thing I'd like perhaps to get you to think about is what do you think when you see well-being? And I know it's something that certainly I've been involved with talking to a lot of people about recently, and we hear a lot from different people that kind of puts it broadly into three boxes. One is that it's the provision of yogurt and yoga. It's the soft and fluffy things that make people feel comfortable. For others, it's about mental health first aid, and it's just the providing something when people are in a really bad situation. And there's been lots of talk. We've had a number of EASA webinars to support the implementation of pilot peer support programs, and that's a key part of it. We also hear that there's also some organisations and some people that say there's the feeling of kind of stop complaining, get on with it. We're all going through this crisis. Let's just get through it and let's not talk about it. And actually, as human beings with so much going on, that's actually potentially the easiest thing to do. At the same time, it's probably the worst thing we could do. What we want to do is really focus on having open and honest conversations with each other, within our organisations and as an industry, on what well-being really is. Some people have asked me, why are EASA so involved in well-being? It's, dare I say, in terms of the work we're doing at the moment, it's more recently focused around the crisis, but there's been a lot of work going on in the past, and hopefully there'll be a lot more in the future. But certainly from an EASA perspective, the analysis we did of the safety issues arising from the virus, there's a very real impact on safe operations because of well-being. And of the 10 top safety issues that we had in that analysis, 2 of those 8 were based around well-being and well-being factors and about staff and all of those things. As well as the safety perspective, probably the biggest reason to be involved in well-being is because it's the right thing to do. At EASA, we're all aviators. We're part of the aviation community, and the pain of our industry right now is a collective pain. And we want to do as much as we can to help as many people as possible during this crisis. So, one of the most visual references we have to safety in our industry is a safety demonstration. So what I'm going to do during the next 10 minutes, really, is to use the metaphors of a safety demonstration to hopefully do a well-being demonstration, to take you through some of the areas of well-being that people are working on and get you thinking a little bit about how we can have those conversations and those discussions and open up about how we're all feeling and how we can cope through this crisis together. When we start any safety demonstration, the first thing we say to the passengers is, please give us your attention to the safety demonstration. And the most important thing when it comes to well-being is that with all the other things going on, we find the time to pay attention to our emotional well-being and that of others around us, and not all of the operational things that we have to deal with alone. Now, we have one of two choices when it comes to well-being as an industry. We cannot give it the attention that perhaps it needs, and see who's still standing at the end of the crisis, and look around and see who's there, who isn't, and wonder where they went. Or hopefully the best approach is that we work and support and help each other so that at the end of the crisis we can say we got through this together, not alone. The next part of any safety demonstration is then focused on fastening your seatbelt. It provides that physical protection when we're in the aircraft, and certainly anybody in aviation wouldn't think of flying and not having our seatbelt fastened as much as possible. And when it comes to well-being, the seatbelt kind of provides the equivalent of the emotional support that we need. The seatbelt, is really the well-being culture in our industry, and provides that framework that hopefully for this crisis and hopefully beyond becomes a key part of how we operate as an industry and work through our challenges and all these different activities together. When we also do a safety demonstration, there are certain parts of it that relate to different people and different situations. We talk about what to do with children, and babies in terms of life rafts. We have all sorts of different situations to deal with and to brief in the safety demonstration. We consider what happens if we land on water, what happens if there's an oxygen failure, all of these things. And in the same way, when it comes to our well-being during this crisis, it's the same. We have many different people in many different situations. And just to highlight some of the personal situations we have, I take on the left there, we have a lady called Val. She's also involved in the European Aviation Wellbeing Committee. And she's perhaps, we would say, one of the lucky ones. She's still involved in aviation, doing the same job, working on the ramp in all weathers at Dublin Airport. But she's doing that whilst also dealing with PPE, with the uncertainty of, will she have a job next week, next month? Perhaps sometimes with less people, sometimes with more work. There are so many challenges the people who are still working have to face. We have to take a step back and think what that means. The second person we have there is a guy called Stephen. Before the crisis, Stephen was a 787 pilot. Again, you might say he's also one of the lucky ones where he's managed to find another position, working for a small operator, supporting and working as their safety manager. But he's had to make difficult choices to keep a roof over his head, to keep his own sanity, to manage that transition and that situation. And it's not something that people can do alone. The third person we have there is Fahid. He was working for an airline before the crisis and now finds himself as a delivery driver and working, supporting logistics, completely outside aviation. And one of the things that will define how we deal with this crisis is there will be a lot of people who will have to leave the industry perhaps for hopefully a short period of time. But the number of those that come back will be a function of how we look after them while they're away. And that's a key thing. And similarly, we have people who are being challenged considerably. Leading and managing organizations through such a challenging situation isn't easy. And again, we have to think about how we can support and work together and help the people who have to make these terribly hard decisions in these terribly difficult times. And of course, the other key person is you. Everybody in the industry is going through completely different situations, and taking the time to think about what that means for you, what that means to the people around you, your friends, your colleagues, and how you can support and help each other is a vital part of that. So what's EASA doing? So from our side, we see ourselves having a key role, raising awareness, bringing to focus the challenges we're having with well-being, and hopefully starting this, continuing having a discussion about well-being and what it really means. We're working closely with a range of different organisations, particularly the Lived Experience Wellbeing Project with Trinity College Dublin, the Royal Aeronautical Society Human Factors Group, collaborating with the European Cockpit Association, EPSI, all sorts of organisations working on well-being to build a well-being resource hub, so that regardless of what people do in aviation and the situation they find themselves in, they can quickly and easily find the support and the material that they need. So we're developing with Claudio Martirano and the TC Alliance a great deal of supporting material, particularly for people who find themselves looking for work, transferable skills, but to provide all of this material so that we can support people and provide these different things. And we've connected with a large number of organizations, but if you're involved in well-being activities, and please reach out to me on LinkedIn or reach out through the EASA Contact Us by contacting the safety promotion team. In terms of as an industry, in the same way we provide emergency devices on aircraft, we need to provide a range of emergency devices and day-to-day tools to help people. And it's vital that we support that. As an industry, we need to be aware of burnout. We need to try and lead with compassion. And one of the big things we see is organizations are having to make really difficult choices at the moment. And people are having to leave organizations and go out into the cold of the world. And there's a concept that we're talking about called the Wellbeing Conservatory. There are various organizations, Aviation Action, Resilient Pilot, there are others. We have this idea called this Wellbeing Conservatory provides a place that, as organizations, there will be these difficult choices. But instead of going into the cold, there are other people from the industry who are there in these organizations to help and support them. And finally, at a personal level, there are two key things. And when we have our safety demonstration, when it talks about the oxygen mask, it says, fix your own mask before helping others. And that's the first key thing. Look after yourself. Think about your own well-being. It's something I've been doing in a way I've never really thought about before. And it's something you need to do as a vital part of your own self-help. But then also give help to others. Start these discussions and conversations with your colleagues, your friends, in a way perhaps we've never done before. We have to do this as an industry if we're going to get through this. And just to finish, there's one key phrase. I spent a lot of time trying to think about what meaningful and inspirational quote could I come up with to finish a talk like this. And in the end, I had to fall back on the great minds of Bill S. Preston Esquire and Ted Theodore Logan, who said, be excellent to each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John. So, our first panel for today is going back to the subject that was really very much on our minds before the crisis started. How can aviation become greener?